Hi there, you lovely, lovely audience. I'm Sophia-Helene and this is Life, Love, and Linguistics. The only, it's the only show on the internet that has that fucking introduction, I can guarantee you that. So, what was that about exactly? Many of my favorite YouTubers have spent some time discussing issues of mental health lately. For example, Philosophy Tubes, one of his most recent videos tackled mental health at the intersection of domestic abuse, or rather, tackled issues at the intersection of mental health and domestic abuse. It was an incredibly brave video to make. And then the absolute madmen went on to do a live stream reading of the completed works of William Shakespeare for charity. And I don't know exactly how that ended. I had to go to work, and when I came back, the stream was over. But when I left, he was at about $150,000 that he raised for the Samaritans, which is a mental health charity in the UK. That's hot. That kind of generosity makes me hot. Okay? And speaking of hot, my my future ex-wife, Mia Mulder, recently did a video which she explored transsexuals through the lens of suffering, which, if you're going to explore the issue of transsexuals, transmedicalists, or other forms of true scum, suffering is a good place to start. Anyway, it's very in right now to talk about your mental health openly. It's not a matter of vanity or attention seeking. So yesterday, I was at the grocery store, and there was a magazine cover with Robin Williams. Robin's struggle with depression is now a matter of public record, but at the time it wasn't. His death, along with the deaths of several high-profile entertainers of the 90s, sparked a movement to normalize talking about mental health. Not just depression, mind you. In the same era, we lost both Philip Seymour Hoffman and Dolores O'Riordan, both immense talents to addiction. And we were pretty aware that they were addicted, but substance abuse as a mental illness is a relatively recent phenomenon as well. And it's so important that we talk about mental illness, not just to normalize seeking help, but so that we know that we, the sufferer, are not alone. For those of you who aren't aware, and that's probably most of you, I've attempted to commit suicide twice. And we'll get into that. But the point is this: the knowledge, or failing that, the belief that I was not alone, and that has literally saved my life on more than one occasion. I'm here today because someone said something, and I knew that I was not alone, suffering all of dysfunction. I wasn't a failed simulacrum of a functional human. I was experiencing a human moment. I would not have survived that moment if I did not have a human connection. Anyway, as you can tell from the intro to this video, I've been having a bit of a time of it, and when the depression gets bad, it exacerbates some underlying conditions, one of which I only very recently, embarrassingly recently, became aware was even a mental health concern. And I want to talk about it because it's fucked up my life immensely, profoundly, and measurably. And maybe this will help someone somewhere. And if not, it contributes to a discourse that is wholesome and meaningful, and that's good enough. I have intrusive thoughts, like a lot of them, which on the scale of things doesn't seem to be the worst thing ever, but try living with it for 28, are we buying 28? 28 years. This is not exactly accurate, though. The first time I remember having an intrusive thought was in the second grade. Obviously, because of a neural pruning phase in between then and now, my memories are less reliable than normal, which is saying something. Anyway, we were waiting in line for the bathroom, and my brain just flashed, and everyone was dead. I didn't for a second believe it was reality. It was all in my head. It was clearly all in my head, but it was persistent and unwanted, and every now and then it would happen. Then it really kicked into high grade in the third grade. The first time I was overwhelmed by intrusive thoughts was in the fourth grade. We were learning how to take notes by copying notes from a transparency. Remember those? And I can't remember what I thought about, but the mental input was so intense that I had stopped writing and had been scribbling on the page for like 5 minutes before the brat that sat next to me tattled on me. Most of my intrusive thoughts are of grotesque violence. Not all of them. I do get embarrassing intrusive thoughts, but my mind would be enveloped by these horrors that would vivisect everyone around me in my head. And it wasn't an image that I could push out of my mind or push to the back of my mind. It was there. And, acknowledging it rarely made it go away. So by the time I was in middle school, my grades had been suffering for years because my mind was occupied 8 hours a day by these nauseating visions of my friends dying horribly over again. I was hypervigilant in the 8th grade and irritable, and I was flooded with these thoughts constantly. Fun fact, I made the soccer team, and I only got to play once because I couldn't maintain a C average. It was homework that got me. I'd go home at night and just try to process all the shit that I had seen as a way of keeping up pace. Well, I was trying to keep pace with Legion, and I lost pace with school. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus approaches a man afflicted by demons. He forces them to give him their name, and they say, "I am called Legion, for I am many." For we are many. And Jesus then cast them into a swine herd about 2,000 strong, and all of those swine then went and drowned themselves in the sea. I also turned to God in an attempt to flee the demons in my head. And in fact, my first suicide attempt was when I realized that God wasn't coming to save me. The days of those kind of miracles were over, if they ever existed at all. One of my shitty atheist acquaintances, seeing that I was at the end of my rope on the bus ride home, said to me something I've never forgotten in all of these years. I still resent asshole atheists for saying this to this day. He turned to me and said, "I know this is a bad moment, but where is your God now?" And thanks, fucking Thunderfoot. Very helpful. This is the shit that makes people less likely to listen to what you have to say. Anyway, my first suicide attempt was so laughably ineffectual that my parents don't even know it happened. I alluded to it once. They're not interested in talking about it. Anyway, the wound healed extraordinarily well, and I have trouble finding the scar these days. When I was a sophomore, Columbine shooting happened, and I realized that many of you watching probably don't remember that. Maybe you weren't even born yet. Columbine changed everything about being a kid in school in America. Suddenly, there were armed guards and metal detectors and bag searches, and suddenly I was comfortable. I wasn't the only one who instinctively devised 3 ways out of any room. I wasn't the only hyper-vigilant one. I wasn't the only one who was afraid all the time. And I wasn't the only one who thought a lot about violence. The aftermath of what at the time was the deadliest school shooting in American history had made me not weird anymore. And I felt guilty for all that. And that guilt ate at me, and that caused depression, and that compounded the issues, and as it turns out, exacerbated the intrusive thoughts. I am Legion, for we are many. As most of my long-term fans will know, when I was 18 years old, I, due in part to my poor academic performance, I joined the Navy, and I quickly found a home. That's not a good thing. See, the first phase in training is the infamous boot camp. Now, it's fallacious to assume that basic training was all that difficult. It really wasn't. But it was not soothing, and it did reward my hypervigilance. And it was extremely stressful. And to answer the snobby question that's presumably formulating in some of the veterans who are watching this' head, yes, it's because of combat. Yes, it's a thing that rarely happens for sailors, but does happen occasionally. But what you may not know is that ships are incredibly dangerous places. It's not so much that sailing is inherently dangerous, but that neither the sea nor ship will suffer the unwary gladly. There are 1.5 million bizarre and novel ways to die on a ship. I knew of a guy who died buying a soda in a storm. I knew of a guy who died doing maintenance on a perfectly ordinary pipe, and, sailors notwithstanding, however you think that happened, you're probably wrong. It was an AFFF installed system where the fire main, it was just salt water from the sea, was mixed with AFFF, which is like a hulked out laundry detergent, left in a pipe to degrade over time. With the pipe as a catalyst, it formed deadly hydrogen sulfide gas. When he opened the pipe, the space was flooded with H2S. He was dead in 2 minutes. His buddy didn't find him until he'd been dead for 3 minutes. My hypervigilance was rewarded on a ship. I still sleep on my stomach with my leg cocked to the side so I don't fall out of my bed when the ship takes a heavy roll. I mean, I'm getting better. I also have a fear of arriving places because I'm so used to getting shouted at when I arrive places. Anxiety plus hypervigilance over so I don't die in some clownish, ridiculous way over years. It's not good for you. But it worked out for me. And then I got out, and then I got married, and briefly went into private security for a warehouse in an area known for a local cargo theft ring. I nearly lost my toes and got back into the military and the Coast Guard this time. Back to boot camp, back to the shouting, back to the rewarded hypervigilance. Here's the thing, though. You can be hypervigilant, but that doesn't make things happen. So it was really just a lot of stress and expecting things to happen, and then they just wouldn't. And with that stress, you bet your ass that will increase the intrusive thoughts. Well, it does for me anyway. Which led to that same fucked up preoccupation that really screwed my school life. And my wife left about this time, which, like the shittiest Captain Planet imaginable, led to me missing an extremely important deadline over something extremely foolish, which led to me getting punished, which led to a chain of events that would screw me like Ron Jeremy, but with a bigger dick and less warmth. You're welcome for that image. Moving on. The bottom line of this whole fustercluck is that I couldn't work in intelligence anymore. So I got sent back to a ship. Same shit, different day. And the next thing you know, I've been stressed and hypervigilant and still suffering with these fuck damn thoughts for 10 years of my life. Until one day, I was brought into sick bay, and Doc sat me down and asked me one very simple question. Are you transgender? It had been a hard patrol. I was tired. I'd gotten migraines and I was expected to work through them. I'd been berated, I'd been disciplined, I'd made powerful enemies when I evaded discipline after having not done anything worth disciplining. There were tears in my eyes. I was frozen in place for what felt like an eternity before I shrugged and nodded. He said, you know what has to happen, so I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you transgender? Yes. The next morning I was called into the CO's cabin. CO was there, XO was there, the supply officer was there, and the doc was there. CO handed me a memo saying that I was to be discharged. I didn't have the will to stop it. I mean, I tried a little bit. I appealed the discharge order. I tried making a civil rights complaint. I fought with the entire base command, including one very tense confrontation with the Pacific Fleet Master Chief, who was both a lesbian and a TERF, and for which I nearly got in a lot of trouble. I consoled myself that when I got out, things would go back to normal, whatever the fuck that meant for me. Life might be okay, maybe. But then I entered when I left the military, I went to college. I'd taken a few classes here and there, but it was a new shot at an academic environment. I had a chance to make right what I had fucked up so badly as a child. And I failed. I was, at the time of my transition in college, the only out trans person on campus. But not the only trans person. Not if the people who continuously came out to me were anything to go by. They were afraid to come out because the campus environment was really hostile. The administration was amazing. All my professors were amazing. I was asked to sit on diversity panels. I was asked to give lectures at Business 101 and business ethics classes. I did a diversity panel at a local industrial conference. I'll put it to you this way, though. Self-described theological fascist Matt Walsh was recently scheduled to speak at the school. This was back in April. Apparently, the hot goss from the school is that he was invited surreptitiously and it wasn't supported by the administration. But I can't find any information on the talk, so I have to assume that despite the pledges to fight his appearance, it might have gone forward. Point is, it wasn't super surprising to anyone when there was a yik-yak conversation about what should be done with me, and it was extremely violent. Fortunately, I'd been exposed to garish displays of violence in my own head my entire life, so I was unintimidated by these threats. And it helped the trans community at my school feel a little more comfortable, seeing me confront the people who were conspiring to harm me by word or deed. It's like maybe there's an upside to all this. I'm not saying I'm glad I have intrusive thoughts. I'm not. I would give anything to be rid of this. It is extremely painful and guilt-inducing, and it makes relationships very difficult. Can you imagine not loving your parents? Because seeing them die over and over and over again until you can't love them because it just hurts too much. Do you have any idea what that's like? As a child, can you imagine what it's like to envision waking up next to the most important person in your life spread out over several rooms while some formless horror munches on the wreckage. I've traumatized myself. No. I've been traumatized by my own mind. I don't want this. I don't have a choice. I have PTSD. I don't like horror movies. Weird exception, Hellraiser. And honestly, I don't even like watching them. I'm hyper-vigilant, and I'm irritable, and I'm distant, and I want to love so badly, but I'm afraid to give Legion something to glom onto. But I've also served my country adequately, even admirably. I've protected my people like some big trans Gaia. It's the reason they stress you out so much in boot camp is they're trying to fit you into one of three generalized categories of reaction to existential stress. People are either fine, they either freak, or they freeze. So they simulate the stress of combat or war readiness footing most days so that they can find out which category you fall into and try to nudge you into the I'm fine category. I've always been pretty good under pressure. I know I can take a lot of it. I've learned this because of my mental illness. But it is knowledge that has cost me dearly. And again, I didn't realize this was an actual pathology until very recently. I thought everybody was like me. I have intrusive thoughts. I have Legion inside me, and it has made me strong, and it has cost me so much. I know there are those who can't stand up for themselves, who can't be strong like I am able to. I can take my pain, I can take my illness, and I can use it to help people. And that's why you're going to find me on the front lines of any squabble with the anti-trans crowd. Which is not to say I wouldn't seek treatment for my illness. If you're out there and you have intrusive thoughts that are affecting your normal function, please seek help. Therapy, I don't know, maybe there are drug treatments available. I don't know, but you need to seek help. You are not alone. That is so important for you to know. And you have more pleasant company than Legion, I guarantee you. I've never not been disgusted by thoughts of violence, and my mind attacks me with that. What I want to say to people who don't have intrusive thoughts is, we are not dangerous. We don't want what's happening to us. We don't like it. I'm disinclined to any kind of violence. You've nothing to fear from us. We've nothing to fear from each other, but fear itself. Thanks for bearing with me on this journey. It's not been fun for me. Like and subscribe. And if you're so inclined, my Patreon link is in the description. Anything that you are moved to give would be helpful. I just got my video editing software back, and guys, I love it. So I want to give a special thanks to Hong Kong Zhang, who actually hooked me up with the Surface Pro that I'm using as a computer right now, because my laptop kind of bit the dust. I want to thank all my patrons on Patreon, and I love you guys.